Stop everything, because what's happening with the Raiders right now could change the entire future of this franchise. We're just days away from the draft, and the signals coming out of this team are loud. We have 10 major updates today, and some of them might shock Raider Nation. Before we go any further, if you love this team, if you live and breathe silver and black, and subscribe right now because things are about to get intense. Let's not waste time. We're diving straight into the quarterback situation, because honestly, everything starts there. And today feels like one of those turning point days. You've got Fernando Mendoza stepping into the building for a major visit, and at the same time, the Raiders have already brought in a veteran presence with Kirk Cousins. That combination alone tells you something important: this team is not guessing anymore, they're building a plan. But here's where it gets interesting. There's still a big question hanging over this entire room: what happens with Aidan O'Connell? Because quietly, and I mean quietly, this might actually be one of the most balanced quarterback rooms the Raiders have had in years. You've got experience, you've got youth, and you've got potential. And when you combine a veteran mentor with a developing prospect, that's how franchises stabilize. But let me ask you this early on. Are the Raiders finally building a long-term answer at quarterback, or are we still looking at another temporary solution? Because timing matters in the NFL. And the fact that Mendoza is meeting with the team right as off-season momentum builds. That's not random. That's intentional. Now let's shift gears to the running back position, and this is where things start to get strategic. There's been clear interest here. Conversations. Visits. Internal discussions. This isn't a team ignoring the position, this is a team planning for depth. But here's the key detail: don't expect a splash early. With how the draft board is shaping up, the Raiders are far more likely to target a running back later. We're talking day 3. Why? Because they've positioned themselves with multiple picks, and that's where value meets opportunity. And when you look at the visits they've already done, especially bringing in specific prospects, it becomes obvious. They're not guessing. They're targeting. So let me say it clearly, this team will draft a running back. It's not a maybe. It's not a possibility. It's happening. Now let's talk about one of the most exciting, and honestly unpredictable, positions on this roster. Wide receiver. Because this is where things could explode. Yes, they've added pieces. Yes, they've made moves. But let's be real, this team is still searching for a true WR1. A guy who changes games. A guy defenses fear. And when you look at the amount of scouting, meetings, and evaluations happening at this position, it screams urgency. Not only could the Raiders draft one receiver, they might draft 2. Think about that. One early, maybe in that second-round range, and another later to create competition and depth. That's how you rebuild a unit fast. And here's the brutal truth Raider Nation needs to hear. Not everyone currently on this roster is safe. Competition is coming. And for some players, it's going to be make or break. Now it's time for the question of the day. I want you to be real with me. Which position should the Raiders prioritize the most in this draft: quarterback, wide receiver, or defense? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I'm reading everything. Let's move on to the tight end group, and for once, this might actually be the least stressful conversation. Because this room, it's solid. You've got talent. You've got versatility. You've got depth. There's no urgency here, just refinement. Could they add another piece? Maybe. But if they do, it's going to be late. Developmental. Low risk. This is one of the few positions where the Raiders can actually sit back and say, we're good. Now here's where things start to get controversial. The offensive line. Because if you listen to the outside noise, you'd think this is a massive problem. A glaring weakness. Something that must be fixed immediately. But internally, That's not the feeling at all. There's confidence in this group. Real confidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't lead to panic drafting. And when you look at the lack of major scouting attention here compared to other positions, it tells a story. This team does not view the offensive line as a top priority. In fact, don't be surprised if they wait until day 3, or even pass entirely on drafting a lineman early. That might frustrate some fans. That might shock analysts. But inside that building, they believe in what they have. Now we flip to the defensive side of the ball, and this is where things get serious. Because if there's one area that needed fixing coming into the offseason, it was the defense. Let's start with the defensive line. This unit is being reshaped, not rebuilt, reshaped. There's a focus on adding strength inside. Depth. Rotation. Players who can hold the line and create pressure from the interior. And here's the key detail, the Raiders are doing their homework. Extensive homework. This isn't random scouting. This is targeted evaluation. Specific fits. Specific roles. Expect them to address this position on day 2 or day 3, but make no mistake. They're adding to this group. Now let's talk about linebackers, and this might be one of the most underrated improvements on the entire roster. Because not long ago, this was a major concern. Now, it's quietly becoming a strength. New additions. Better depth. More versatility. And because of that, this position drops down the priority list heading into the draft. If they add someone here, it'll be late, and that player better contribute on special teams. Because that's the standard now. Let's move to the cornerback room, and this is where things get really interesting. The Raiders made moves here. Aggressive moves. They identified a need, and they attacked it. That tells you something about how this front office operates. They don't wait. They don't hesitate. They act. And because of that, cornerback might not be as high on the draft board as people think. Yes, depth is always valuable. Yes, competition matters. But based on what we've seen, this team might only add a corner late in the draft, if at all. Now here's a position that absolutely cannot be ignored. Safety. This is a real need. A serious one. And unlike some other positions, this is not being masked or hidden. It's been acknowledged. The current roster. It lacks a true difference maker at free safety. And that's why this could be one of the biggest targets on day 2. If you're looking for a position where the Raiders could make a bold move, this is it. Finally, let's wrap things up with something most fans overlook. Special teams. But don't underestimate this. Because behind the scenes, the Raiders are doing a lot of work here. Kickers. Specialists. Returners. They're evaluating everything. And here's something to keep in mind, competition is coming. No position is safe. No role is guaranteed. If someone can come in and perform better, they'll get the job. That's the mindset. So when you step back and look at the full picture, this isn't a team guessing anymore. This is a team with a plan. A plan at quarterback. A plan at wide receiver. A plan on defense. And most importantly, a plan for the future. Because this draft, it's not just about adding talent. It's about defining the identity of the Las Vegas Raiders moving forward. And Raider Nation, we're about to find out exactly what that identity is. Let's go back to the quarterback situation for a second, because the deeper you look at it, the more pressure you start to feel. Kirk Cousins gives you stability, no doubt about it. He's a proven veteran, a guy who understands the game, a guy who can step in and run an offense without things falling apart. But let's be honest. He's not the future. He's the bridge. And that means everything depends on what happens next. Fernando Mendoza walking into that building isn't just another visit, it's a statement. It's the Raiders saying, we're thinking long-term now. And that changes everything about how this draft should be viewed. Because if Mendoza is the guy, then every single pick needs to support him. Every receiver. Every lineman. Every decision. This is how you build around a quarterback the right way, not throwing him into chaos, but actually giving him a system, weapons, and time to develop. Now let's take that idea and apply it to the wide receiver room again. Because this is where things could either explode in a good way, or completely stall. You cannot develop a young quarterback without weapons. You just can't. And the Raiders know that. That's why you're seeing them scout multiple receivers, bring in different types of prospects, and look at guys with completely different skill sets. Speed. Size. Route running. Separation ability. They're trying to build a complete room, not just one star, but a unit that works together. Because think about it. What's more dangerous? One elite receiver, or three guys who can all beat you in different ways? That's the direction this feels like it's heading. And if they hit on even one of those picks early, this offense changes overnight. But here's where I want to shift the energy a little bit. Because not everything is about offense. Championship teams. They're built on defense. And the Raiders know they are not there yet. Let's talk about the defensive identity for a second. Because right now, it still feels like it's being figured out. You've got talent, especially with a player like Max Crosby leading the way, but talent alone doesn't win games. You need consistency. You need depth. And most importantly, you need players who fit the system. That's why the focus on defensive tackles is so important. People overlook it all the time, but controlling the middle of the field. That's what allows everything else to work. If your defensive line can't hold up, your linebackers get exposed. Your secondary gets attacked. Everything starts to break down. So when you hear that the Raiders are spending serious time evaluating interior defensive linemen, that's not a small detail. That's foundational. And speaking of foundation, let's go back to the safety position again, because I don't think people fully understand how important this is. Right now, there's no clear answer there. No proven leader. No true game changer. And in today's NFL, that's dangerous. Because offenses are smarter, faster, and more aggressive than ever before. If your safeties can't read plays, cover ground, and make tackles in space, you're going to get exposed. Over and over again. That's why I truly believe this could be one of the most critical picks in the entire draft. Not the flashiest. Not the one that gets all the headlines. But the one that quietly fixes a major weakness. Now let me ask you something. How many times have we seen teams lose games because of one missed tackle, one blown coverage, one bad read? That's the difference between winning and losing in this league. And that's exactly what the Raiders are trying to eliminate. Now let's talk about something that fans don't always want to hear, but it needs to be said. Not every move is going to be exciting. Not every pick is going to be flashy. Some of the most important decisions this team makes are going to feel boring. Depth players. Special teams contributors. Rotational guys. But those are the players that win you games in December, and hopefully January. Because when injuries hit, and they always do, those are the guys who step up. And this is where great teams separate themselves from average ones. It's not just about the stars. It's about the depth. It's about having a roster where, if one guy goes down, another guy is ready. No drop-off. No excuses. Now bring it all together for a second. Quarterback plan in place. Wide receiver room being rebuilt. Defense getting stronger piece by piece. Special teams being re-evaluated. This is not random. This is a full roster transformation. And it's happening right in front of us. But here's the reality. None of it matters if they don't execute. Because we've seen teams have great plans before. We've seen teams win the off-season. We've seen hype, excitement, expectations. And then the season starts, and everything falls apart. So the real question is, can the Raiders finally turn potential into results? Because Raider Nation has been waiting. Waiting for consistency. Waiting for a real contender. Waiting for a team that doesn't just talk about winning, but actually does it. And this draft. This is the moment. This is where it starts. Every pick. Every decision. Every move. It all adds up. So as we get closer and closer to draft night, pay attention to the details. Not just who they pick, but why they pick them. Because that's where the real story is. That's where you see the vision. That's where you understand what this team is truly trying to become. And if they get it right, we might be looking at the beginning of something special. But if they get it wrong, we're having this same conversation all over again next year. And nobody in Raider Nation wants that.